Hey everybody, today I'm going to be removing the clutch delay valve on my 2018 Jeep Renegade Latitude. It's got a 1.4 turbo multi-air Fiat engine in it with a 6-speed manual transmission, and when you first get these vehicles they have a clutch delay valve in it, which what it does is delays the engagement of the clutch so that if you're not an experienced driver of a manual transmission, you're not going to completely destroy or bog down the engine from not operating the clutch properly. So I'm going to show you this really easy process to remove this thing, and hopefully we'll get a little better response out of the clutch when I'm done. What we're going to be working on is down here below the battery. I don't know if you can see it, but this hose right here, when you get into this little piece back here, which you'll be able to see a little better when I get it out of the car, there's some valving and some springs in there. We're going to remove all those springs and valve, and then we're going to put it back together and bleed the system, and should be pretty straightforward. There's two little auto clips that hold this thing in, one right to the right in front of where my hand is right now. It's very difficult to see when I get it out. There, now you might be able to see it. So the clip is right there where my finger is pointing, and then the other clip is located right there, directly underneath the battery. There's a little metal clip. I gotta find it. Yeah, a little metal clip right where my finger is. You pull that clip out towards the engine that way, and the hose should pop out. Everything disassembled. This is the hose that you should have out. What we're gonna do is we're gonna pop that little clip right there out. Once we pop that little clip out, then we should be able to remove the insides from in here, and that's the clutch delay valve. So hopefully I can get this to record while I do it, and you'll be able to see what exactly what I'm doing. So well, maybe there, that'll work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push in on the end right here and pry out on that clip. I don't have my pocket knife with me. There we go. So all you do is just apply a little bit of pressure to the end of it, squeeze it right here, and you should be able to remove that clip. Once you remove that clip, you can easily pop this thing apart, and you'll see all the brake fluid come out of it. But then you have the spring, the actual valve, and another spring. So you just remove these pieces right here and pop it back together. So now that those pieces are gone, I'm just going to pop this back together. So there we go. And then pop the clip back in. And that's all we had to do. All right, now we can put this back in the car, bleed the clutch, and see how much of a difference we've made. Now, while I was doing this, I stuck a towel inside the line so that I wouldn't lose a bunch of brake fluid, and I left a lid on the brake fluid so that it creates kind of a suction so that it won't allow a lot of brake fluid to leave. Once I get this back assembled, I will have to have either my daughter or my wife or my son come out here and help me bleed the clutch. But it's pretty straightforward. There's a bleeder valve on the piece that the hard plastic clips into. I'll see if I can get a shot of it once I get this back together. Okay, so I got the clutch delay valve removed. I had my daughter help me bleed the clutch, and discovered this is a pretty cool setup for how you bleed the clutch on these things. It's much easier than cracking open a bleeder valve or anything like that. That fitting down in the on the relief or on the delay valve side of that hose, the side that you disconnect it from the slave cylinder, I actually thought you had to pull up on it, but you don't. You squeeze down on it, and there's actually two stops on it. You pop it into the first stop, and that's where it opens the bleeder hole on the top of a fitting that it clips into. And then if you pull it out a little bit further, the whole hose comes out. So the way that you bleed this thing is you actually make sure that your reservoir has enough fluid in it, and then you engage all the hoses, uncover your bleeder fitting, and put a rubber hose on it, and then press your clutch pedal to the floor, come out here to the engine compartment, and pop the hose out to the first click coming out of the slave cylinder, and that will open the bleeder screw, or the bleeder hole. There is no screw, and it will bleed the fluid out of the master cylinder, or out of the clutch system, I guess I should say. So then you pop the hose back in, go inside the cab and pull the pedal up. Do the same thing. Pop the bleeder system open again, push the pedal to the floor, pop the hose back tight, pull the pedal up. Do that until you get pressure in the system. Then you can have an assistant pump the pedal, build up a little bit of residual pressure, and then you can pop the hose loose and continue bleeding the system, because at this point the pedal won't stay down on its own. You actually have to push it down and hold it with your foot until you pop the bleeder open and you lose the pressure off the system. Then it will stay on its own. But as soon as you pull the pedal up one time after you close the bleeder, it's back to full pressure, or not full pressure, but enough pressure that it overcomes the return spring and makes the pedal pop all the way back up. So after you get the initial pressure built up in the system, you will have to have an assistant, or you will have to have a vacuum, or not a vacuum system, but a pressure bleeder for this system. It does require two people. I don't see how you can do it by yourself without building some kind of contraption to push the pedal while you're out here under the hood. But I have not driven it yet. I'm going to go take it for a drive here in just a second, see what kind of a difference I can tell in how the clutch engages, disengages, if it affects any kind of drivability issues or anything like that. This is the first vehicle I've ever had with a clutch delay valve in it. The clutch felt really spongy to me from the day that I bought the car. I've only had this car for about 4 weeks now, maybe 4.5 weeks. I'm not 100% certain on that, but it drives good. My biggest complaint so far with the car is that under aggressive acceleration, and I'm not talking race car acceleration, but when I'm trying to pull out of a parking lot and I'm trying to go at a little bit quicker speed than what would normally be needed, when I go to shift into second, I have to put a little bit of a delay in myself before I shift into second, because I'm getting a pretty consistent grind when I try and go into second if I'm under heavy acceleration. I also notice that when you disengage the clutch, it hesitates a little bit. It feels like it doesn't want to go straight off the bat. It also kind of feels like the clutch may be slipping a little bit, which I've attributed to the clutch delay valve. Hopefully that's going to address some of those issues. I don't think it's going to address the first to second grind. I have had it do a second to third grind on uphill heavy acceleration. So I'm hoping that this addresses some of those issues. If not, my next course of action is going to be to replace all the motor mounts with a little bit stiffer mounts. I don't know that I'll go full solid filled mounts, but I may go. I know that I'm going with a much denser filler material in the mounts. I'm looking at doing the Delamy, or I don't know how to say their name, but they make some pretty good motor mounts from what I've been reading online for the Fiat 500, and since this is the same engine as the 500, should be pretty substantial improvement over the original equipment mounts. So with that being said, I'm gonna take this thing out for a test drive, and we'll see how the clutch feels and if it made any drastic improvements. So we'll go from there. Alright, so getting ready to drive this for the first time with the clutch delay valve removed, and the clutch already feels different to me. That may just be in my head, but it really does feel different just doing this little bit of backing up. Let's see how it really does. So now this clutch actually, now it feels like a full-fledged cable clutch. It doesn't really feel like a hydraulic clutch to me, even though it is a hydraulic clutch. It's very reminiscent of a cable clutch style feel. You can definitely feel an engage and a disengage point, whereas before you couldn't. It felt very sloppy. It was very hard to tell when the clutch was starting to catch and when it wasn't starting to catch. And now that may be good for inexperienced drivers, but I've been driving manual transmission cars ever since I was 16. So I definitely am not a novice. I've driven quite a few different, just about every freaking make and model of manual transmission that there is available, except for exotics, just because I don't have that kind of money. But all your base model cars and trucks and things like that have manual transmissions, I've driven just about every style that there is. The clutch definitely feels vastly improved. I would highly recommend this mod to anybody else. If you're not happy with how your clutch feels, this is a vast improvement. I mean, I've only driven it a little bit, and this thing feels way better than it did from the factory. I probably should have done this right when I first bought the car. It definitely feels like it's shifting smoother. There's a definite engage-disengage point that I did not feel before. Like I say, it felt very spongy to me. Very wide area of engage and disengage, and I think that's because of how the valving worked. It would actually slow down the release of the clutch. I don't necessarily know that it would slow down the disengage of the clutch, but it would slow down the engage of the clutch. I'm not 100% certain on how the whole system works. I haven't really done a super ton amount of research on it, but it definitely is a vast improvement over the factory setup. The car already feels 100% better to me as far as clutch engagement and disengagement. Very pleased with this. So I'll continue to drive it, see how the system works in the long run. I do drive a lot of miles per year. I typically average 40 to 60,000 miles a year for my job. So this will definitely get a fair amount of use on it, and we'll be able to see if there's any reliability issues that are caused from it, any long-term effects, or any long-term benefits. So hopefully we'll see some long-term benefits, less clutch wear, better drivability for a longer period, because I have heard that these cars have a lot of issues with clutches wearing out too soon, and I would attribute that to the delay valve and people not really knowing how to drive a manual transmission the correct way. Because as long as you rev match the engine when you're disengaging and engaging the clutch, you should have minimal transmission or clutch wear over the life of the vehicle. I've had plenty of transmissions that have gotten over 200,000 miles on a factory clutch. Now that's not very common. A lot of those miles are highway miles, so that's not going to be your average driving in traffic everyday car. Typically you're probably only going to see about 80,000 miles out of a clutch if you're driving it in traffic every single day, non-stop, bumper to bumper, like in Atlanta where I'm close to. But if you're driving mostly highway with an occasional amount of traffic,
I've seen clutches last over 200,000 miles. So hopefully I'll be able to get at least 100 to 130 out of this one. I've been seeing reports of these failing at 40 to 60,000 miles. So I'm trying to be proactive on everything on this car. I got this car as a new old stock vehicle. So it has very low miles. I've only had it for 4 weeks, and now it has 5,000 miles on it. So I mean, if that tells you how many miles I do drive, this car will see a lot of mileage over a very short period of time. So just stay up with the videos and see how the vehicle's going, and I'll keep you updated on all my progress.